David Lynch hadn't made a single movie in almost 20 years before his death, and most of his movies were flops. After the Dune disaster, he stuck with low budgets for the rest of his career and never really found commercial success again. Honestly, just saying this makes me a little bit depressed. It was never really about box office numbers for the man, but let's take a look at how his movies compare when it comes to budget versus box office. It started with Eraserhead, a debut made on a shoestring, just $100,000, most of it scraped together over years. Lynch's first concept, Gardenback, was based on his own painting, a hunched figure with plants growing out of its back, but that got turned down. He reworked the idea and sold Eraserhead as a surrealist piece. It got the American Film Institute's dean behind him so much, the guy literally threatened to quit if Lynch didn't get his way. So Lynch got permission to use the entire campus for filming. The script was just 21 pages, but nobody on set expected the scale or the time it took to finish. Production dragged on for years because they never had enough money to just finish it. The structure was unconventional, but the movie sparked curiosity from the start. After its premiere, it became a midnight movie phenomenon. It ran for years in theaters across the country and easily made back its budget. Stanley Kubrick called it his favorite film. Eraserhead made about $7 million, an absolute success, and it put Lynch on the map as a true original. Next came The Elephant Man. This was Lynch's second movie, and the step-up was massive, a $5 million budget and a real cast with Anthony Hopkins and John Hurt. Producer Jonathan Sanger had gotten the rights to 2 different books on Joseph Merrick, and Mel Brooks got involved, agreeing to finance it. Brooks hadn't even heard of Lynch, but after watching Eraserhead, he brought him on immediately. Brooks even pulled his own name off the producer credits to avoid people thinking it was a comedy. The Elephant Man was about as far from Lynch's usual style as possible. A PG rating, a clear, straightforward narrative, and a focus on real history. Paramount distributed, and this time Lynch had a mainstream audience. The movie grossed $26 million in the US and became another box office win for Lynch. The film got Lynch his first Oscar nomination for Best Director, along with 7 other nominations, including Best Picture. It didn't win any, but the outrage over the lack of a makeup Oscar led the Academy to finally create that category. So that's another Lynch legacy most people don't realize. The very next year, An American Werewolf in London became its first winner. Dune was Lynch's third film, and Universal gave him $42 million to adapt Frank Herbert's massive sci-fi novel. The whole thing was supposed to be Star Wars for grown-ups, but even getting the movie made was a saga. Dune spent years in development hell. Back in the 70s, French producers had Alejandro Jodorowsky attached. They actually planned to cast Salvador Dali, Orson Welles, and Mick Jagger and have Pink Floyd do the score. The project collapsed, budgets ballooned, and eventually Dino De Laurentiis swooped in. He bought the rights and brought Herbert in to write a script. Lynch wasn't even familiar with the book but got interested after reading it. He wrestled with the script, did multiple drafts, and finally settled on one he liked. Production moved to Mexico, and the set was a mess. Failing infrastructure, health problems on set, everything that could go wrong did. The first cut ran 3 hours, but Universal demanded it be trimmed to 2. Lynch and De Laurentiis fought over the changes and finally landed on a 137-minute runtime. Universal pushed the movie hard, hoping to kick off their own sci-fi franchise, but it tanked. $30 million at the box office, nowhere near what they needed. Critics shredded it. Roger Ebert called it incomprehensible, ugly, unstructured, pointless, and named it his worst movie of 1984. Any talk of sequels was dead immediately. Lynch hated what happened. He's been upfront about it ever since. I started selling out on Dune. Looking back, it's no one's fault but my own. I probably shouldn't have done that picture. He later took his name off extended versions. But ironically, it's still the highest-grossing film of his career. Two years later, Lynch pivoted hard. Blue Velvet was built on everything Dune wasn't. Small budget, full creative control. De Laurentiis only gave him the green light if he kept the budget to $6 million, so it was the studio's cheapest film. Lynch finally got the final cut privilege he wanted. This time, Lynch put together a cast of mostly unknowns: Kyle MacLachlan, Dennis Hopper, Isabella Rossellini, and Laura Dern. Even getting the cast wasn't easy. Dern only got her part after everyone else passed, and Rossellini reportedly got dropped by her agency after a test screening. All this because of a movie about a severed ear, a lounge singer, and a kid who stumbles into a criminal underworld after finding that ear in a field. Lynch was euphoric about the creative freedom after the Dune mess, but the film still struggled at the box office, pulling in just $8 million on its $6 million budget. Audiences walked out, people demanded refunds, and the violence and graphic content polarized everyone. Roger Ebert again hated it. He called out Lynch for misogyny. Wild at Heart was Lynch's fifth film. He was coming off Twin Peaks, found Barry Gifford's novel unfinished, and wanted to direct it himself after originally signing on as a producer. He convinced a company to finance it, but had to move fast. Just 2 months to write and start shooting. The story follows Sailor and Lula, a couple on the run from Lula's mother, and a lineup of criminals. Lynch loved the source material, but he didn't stick to it. He changed the ending, threw in Wizard of Oz references, and made the whole thing a personal vision. Test screenings were rough, though. About 200 people walked out during a torture scene. Lynch wanted to keep it, but eventually cut back the violence after seeing the reaction, even though he said disturbing the audience was the whole point. Then came Cannes. The premiere was chaos, and I actually mean that. Applause and booing at the same time. The film won the Palme d'Or in a surprise decision, but critics hated it very publicly. In the end, Wild at Heart earned $14 million, barely beating its $10 million budget, and failed to find an audience in theaters. Like Blue Velvet, it was hit with controversy over violence, but its reputation only grew later. At the time, though, it just looked like another Lynch flop. Lynch's sixth film was supposed to revive Twin Peaks after the show's cancellation, maybe even start a trilogy to wrap up all the storylines. Mark Frost wanted nothing to do with it. Too many arguments with Lynch in the final season. Kyle MacLachlan almost stayed away too, unhappy with where things went on TV, but Lynch talked him into a quick appearance and they filmed all his scenes in just 5 days. Other characters from the series had their scenes shot but then cut. The tone was darker than the show, with most of the humor stripped out. Fire Walk with Me premiered at Cannes. Unlike the series, which critics loved, the movie got hammered. Quentin Tarantino was one of the loudest haters, said he'd never watch another Lynch film again. But over time, that reputation changed, and now plenty of people call it a masterpiece. At the box office, though, it bombed, just $4 million off a $10 million budget. That made 4 bombs in a row for Lynch, so all the plans for a trilogy were dead after that. Lost Highway was Lynch's 7th feature. He found the phrase Lost Highway while reading Barry Gifford's Night People and decided to build a film around that. He'd already worked with Gifford on Wild at Heart. The inspiration for Lost Highway came partly from Lynch's fascination with videotapes and troubled relationships during Fire Walk with Me, but also from the O.J. Simpson trial. It was everywhere at the time. The mystery man in the film is supposed to feel supernatural, even if he's not, and Robert Blake took the part even though he admitted he didn't understand the script. Richard Pryor was cast as a garage manager, his last film role before his death. Reviews were completely split. Siskel and Ebert both gave it 2 thumbs down. Lynch actually used that in the film's marketing, called it 2 more great reasons to see the movie. And it didn't work at the box office. Less than $4 million, barely any theatrical run against a budget of $15 million. After all the shock and surrealism, Lynch's next move was almost a joke. A Disney G-rated biopic. The Straight Story, his 8th film, had a $10 million budget and finished with 6 worldwide. It's based on the real story of Alvin Straight, a World War II vet who decides to visit his estranged brother before it's too late. Because he can't drive anymore, he rigs up a 30-year-old John Deere lawn tractor and sets out on a 240-mile trip from Iowa to Wisconsin at 5 miles an hour. Mary Sweeney, Lynch's longtime collaborator, was drawn to Straight's story right after the man died in 1996. Producer Ray Stark brought her on to write the script, originally thinking Paul Newman would star. Once the script was done, Lynch wanted to direct, so it's actually the only film he directed but didn't write. Richard Farnsworth was fighting terminal cancer during the shoot, but took the part out of respect for Alvin Straight. Disney picked up the film before it even played at Cannes, and it was the only G-rated film Lynch ever made. This time, critics loved it. Even Roger Ebert, who never liked Lynch's other movies, gave it 4 stars. And Farnsworth got an Oscar nomination for Best Actor. Mulholland Drive started out as a pilot for ABC, the same network that had Twin Peaks. The idea was simple enough. A woman, Rita, crawls out of a car crash in L.A. with amnesia, a blue key, and no memory of who she is. Betty Elms takes her in and tries to help figure it out. Lynch had the whole first version ready for TV. But the story is that someone at ABC watched the pilot half asleep, didn't get it, and just killed the whole thing on the spot. A friend told Lynch to salvage what he could, forget TV, make it a feature instead. Lynch found foreign investors, added 18 new pages, rewrote whole sections, and cast Naomi Watts and Laura Herring basically just off their photos, never having seen them in anything. The entire cast showed up on set completely in the dark. No one really knew what they were shooting. That was the point. Lynch wanted that atmosphere of confusion, thought it made the movie better. The end result worked. Mulholland Drive pulled in critical acclaim, probably the most of any Lynch film. Even Roger Ebert, who'd trashed Wild at Heart and Lost Highway, came around and called this one a masterpiece. The movie ended up ranked 8th in the 2022 Sight and Sound Critics poll of the best films ever. Lynch got his 3rd Oscar nomination for Best Director. He lost out to Ron Howard for A Beautiful Mind. It did slightly better at the box office than his earlier films, $20.7 million off a $15 million budget, but it was never a financial hit. His 10th and last film, Inland Empire, saw Lynch shrink his operation even further. He made it for just $3 million. This time, there was no finished script. Lynch shot the whole thing on digital video, handing actors a few pages of fresh dialogue every day, often with no explanation. Most of the cast signed on not really knowing what they were making, same as with Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway. Lynch didn't care about spelling it out. All he'd ever say about the story was, "It's about a woman in trouble, and it's a mystery, and that's all I want to say about it." The movie premiered at festivals and got an outright confused response. A lot of people called it the most impenetrable film Lynch ever made. And when it came to money, it was another miss, his 8th box office flop in a row. $3 million budget, $4.2 million box office. Lynch even ran a 4-year consideration Oscar campaign for Laura Dern, but nothing came out of it.